Howdy my totally tubular gamers, and we are back for another ranking video. Now today's ranking video is going to be on the Lost Planet series. Lost Planet, similar to Dead Rising, is one of Capcom's more underrated series that got really popular in the Xbox 360 generation. In fact, the series started and died on the 360. The series even has the same creator as Dead Rising, Kenji Inafune, who also created Mega Man. Lost Planet came out when Capcom was really trying to appeal to the Western audience. They really were straying away from their Japanese roots to try to create something that could appeal to everybody, to try to make more money. And nowadays Capcom has very obviously strayed away from this entirely, and that entire philosophy is just gone in the company. However, during that time, we did get 3 main Lost Planet games, and again, just for another comparison to Dead Rising, the series has become a cult classic and a cult hit, with many people yearning for some kind of re-release or maybe even a Lost Planet revival. It's crazy, it's been almost 10 years since the last Lost Planet game. I think it's fair to say that the series is dead. But what even is Lost Planet? Maybe you just clicked on this video on accident or something. Well, Lost Planet is a series of third-person shooters that star a number of protagonists on the planet EDN-3, a planet in the process of an ice age, and in these games you fight to survive the environment and various alien creatures as you try to colonize the planet. While all 3 games take place on this planet and are all third-person shooters, each Lost Planet game was surprisingly quite different from the last, and the series never really had a stable foundation. I'd say the most common theme amongst these 3 games was the planet that it takes place on, and the fact that all 3 games are pretty clunky, especially coming back to them. However, that clunkiness definitely adds to the charm. While these games found some commercial success, they never found that critical acclaim that Capcom was looking for. However, I think that most people who played the Lost Planet games and enjoyed them got really into them, myself included, and really wanted to see this series succeed and liked what it was doing. And you know, I don't see anybody talking about Lost Planet these days, and so I thought, why not? I'm gonna rank them. I'm gonna rank the main 3 Lost Planet games from worst to best. And yes, there was that 3DS exclusive only in Japan, but I've never touched that. We're not ranking that. We're gonna be ranking these games based on a couple things. How well do these games hold up? How are they in 2021? How clunky are they? How are they with no multiplayer? How is the story in these games? They even have an interesting world? Is this planet interesting? And of course, quality. All of that matters, and that's how I'm going to rank these 3 games. And of course, if you agree or disagree, please let me know in the comments, like, share, sub. Talk to me about Lost Planet. We all love Lost Planet. Or maybe you don't and you think I'm just an idiot. Either way, let's get started. What do I think is the weakest of the 3 Lost Planet games? I think the weakest of the 3 is Lost Planet 3, which is the latest game in the series. While I don't think Lost Planet 3 is a bad game, it is a very middling game with some very obvious issues that keep it at the bottom of this list. The game takes place before Lost Planet 1 and 2 and stars Jim Payton, and he basically goes over the events that led to the humans coming to EDN-3 and colonizing it and having to put up with the extremely harsh conditions and trying to survive an ice age. Something that Lost Planet 3 has that is much better than 1 and 2 is the story. I think the story of Lost Planet 3 is actually superb. I think it's very underrated and is actually really well done. The writers / developers really went out of their way to make these characters really just lifelike and likable. All of them are just blue-collar workers. They have families. They have mouths to feed. They want to just do their job, and it's quite relatable. The main character, Jim Payton, is also very good. Despite the fact that he looks like Nicolas Cage, his dialogue and general acting is actually really quite good also. So while the story is quite good, the gameplay really is a bit of a mixed bag. Out of the 3 games, this is the least clunky of the Lost Planet games. However, it also is the most generic of the Lost Planet games. The first 2 games had a very linear structure, very linear mission-based formula, and this game opts for something different. It opts for like an open world kind of style method of play with mixed results. The world isn't big at all, and there's really not all that much to see. It's essentially a bunch of hallways connected and sees you going from point A to B and B to A and A to C and C to D and D to A, and you just keep going back and forth. You do missions for these characters, there's gear to upgrade, there's even some side missions, there's some collectibles, and of course you fight a bunch of monsters. The monsters you fight in this game are nowhere near as interesting as the previous 2 games, and all of them are pretty stock standard for really a shooter in general. The combat is functional, but it's not exactly all that engaging. I mean, it works just fine, but it doesn't do anything great. The gunplay doesn't feel all that great, but there's nothing wrong here. Like the other two games, you do get in rigs, and the rigs are not for combat use for the most part. I mean, you do get into a couple combat situations with them, but most of the time it is a utilitarian purpose where you're fixing something or trying to destroy something in the way. In fact, when you're in combat with these rigs, I would say that this is the weakest part of the game. These are quite clunky and really not all that great. Lost Planet 3, again, is not a bad game, but a very unremarkable one. Its gameplay is fine enough, but it doesn't really do anything to stand out from the crowd and feels very average. But it does have a nice story, I can give it that. The only reason I would recommend this game is if you liked the previous two games, then maybe you'll like this one, but I think most people are going to walk away with this one with mixed feelings. So I think the second best Lost Planet game is Lost Planet 2. Lost Planet 2 takes place 10 years after the first game, still on EDN3, and sees the planet actually thawing out through its ice age, leaving a lot of tropical areas. Rather than focusing on a single protagonist, the game instead stars a couple mercenary squads that go through this planet doing whatever it is that they need to do. The story and its characters very much take a back seat to the actual gameplay, and the game even allows you to customize your character. The reason this game stars mercenary squads rather than a protagonist is because they were really pushing for a cooperative experience here. The game supports 4-player co-op, and I absolutely recommend you play this game in co-op, and I would have trouble recommending this game to anybody who wants to just play it by themselves. I played this game probably 10 years ago, and I did play through the entire game cooperatively with my buddies, and we had a great time. This game requires much more coordination than Gears of War ever required, and a lot of these boss fights really require you to be on your A game. And fighting these bosses and just these monsters in general with AI just doesn't really seem like all that great of an idea. The combat in this game is very clunky, is very weighty and heavy. I think the best comparison would actually be with Capcom's own Monster Hunter series. It almost feels like Monster Hunter but with guns. I mean, a lot of these missions really just evolve down to you taking out these huge monsters, and these boss fights can take upwards of like an hour each, so the comparisons to Monster Hunter are right there, clear as day. But I really enjoyed the gameplay of this game. I thought it was a very enjoyable time. It had a lot of tactical elements, and the game was actually quite challenging. I remember the game kicking my buddies and my asses numerous times, and the game had a decent length to it. The game played pretty well, and the game looked phenomenal for when it came out, and even nowadays it still looks pretty good. There's a lot of variety in these missions. You get to go in a bunch of different vehicles that all control differently. The environments are actually quite varied, the most of the entire series. And again, I thought all the encounters were different and unique. I would argue this is probably the best of the 3 Lost Planet games. However, just from the fact that you do need players to play with you rather than the stupid AI, and the fact that the PC version is totally broken with games for Windows Live, I can't put this game at number 1. But I can't deny that I have some very fond memories with Lost Planet 2. They go back to the middle school days where not so much mattered in my life, and I had good old Lost Planet 2 to provide me with a good time. Out of the 3 games, Lost Planet 2 definitely needs a re-release or remaster more than the other ones, just from the fact that you need to hook up a 360 or a PS3 and have 3 other buddies to play with you if you really want to get the best experience with this game. But if you do, I really recommend it. Great time. And so here we have what I think is the best of the 3 Lost Planet games, Lost Planet Extreme Condition. Yes, the original Lost Planet. The original Lost Planet was very unique when it came out, and there really hasn't been many games like it or even close to any games trying to replicate it. Even the other Lost Planets aren't like this. This is a very linear single-player third-person shooter that has that really clunky, heavy, weighty feel to it that again is very similar to Monster Hunter. However, in this game you do get a grappling hook that allows you to basically grapple anywhere. On top of that, the game has this thermal energy feature, which is in the other games to an extent, but in this one, you're constantly losing thermal energy. Just literally walking around, you're losing it, and you have to constantly be on the move collecting it to stay alive and not freeze over. And that's because this planet is so cold. It is very harsh when it comes to weather. That extreme conditions in the title, that's not messing around. It's very extreme here. It's extremely cold is what it is. Like, this is colder than those Amazon freezers. Like, damn. The story was decently interesting, though. See, all of humanity basically is trying to colonize this planet because Earth is just shit all over thanks to global warming, which is very realistic, especially nowadays. So we basically, we leave Earth, kind of like Wall-E, only instead of a nice peaceful like ship, we're trying to colonize this harsh ice planet, essentially. And while the world is decently interesting, unfortunately the actual story isn't very good. It's kind of a revenge tale, and the less said about it the better. The gameplay really is the star here. And yeah, while it is clunky and kind of hard to come back to, I think it still holds up once you get used to its clunkiness. I think the levels are really well done, the grappling hook is well implemented, and then you also get in the vehicles, basically these giant mechs, and you're able to fight other monsters or other mechs, and I've always had a really good time with this. It's engaging, it's interesting, and then the game is also challenging. A lot of the fights have a lot of variety. Fighting each one of the monsters is different from the last, and the gunplay is actually quite well done. And yeah, of course, it's not perfect. I mean, with the game being so heavy and clunky, there are times where you just feel incredibly sluggish, unable to do anything, and you can get stun locked pretty easily in a couple of these boss fights, but it just adds to the challenge. I think it is one of the more underrated shooters on the platform, and while it wasn't anything that blew anyone's mind like Gears of War, I still thought that it was schlepped on, and I really think that this game's been overlooked since day one. I mean, I don't hear anybody talking about Lost Planet anymore, and I think it inspired and helped out Capcom more than people are willing to admit. I mean, look at the grappling hook. The grappling hook's in Monster Hunter Rise now. Monster Hunter is a massive success, and I think that some of Monster Hunter's success really has to do with Lost Planet. I think Lost Planet helped shape part of that. Could I be wrong? I could totally be wrong, but either way, I think most people will agree, especially if you made it to this part of the video, that Lost Planet was pretty good and it didn't really need to end. I mean, sure, it wasn't the most financially successful for Capcom, but it was a fine little B-series they had, kind of like Dead Rising. And like Dead Rising, instead of going out with a bang, it really just kind of fizzled out into the ether, and here we are with it stuck in limbo for almost 10 years now. Capcom is pretty good at re-releasing their games, especially Resident Evil, so I do have faith that eventually we will get a remaster, maybe like a remastered trilogy of the Lost Planet games. I think somewhere down the road we're going to see another Lost Planet, at least a re-release of these games, and hey, who knows, maybe this list will be outdated because there'll be another game. Right now though, we're probably not getting another Lost Planet game, but that's it for this video. I really just wanted to talk about Lost Planet. It was just something I had to get off my chest. If you like Lost Planet, I'm sure you've already let me know in the comments. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. See you.